So, a bit of introduction for those of you who don't know us already. My name's Neil Howes. I'm a partner here at Mills and Reeve. I'm joined today by Sophie Briggs, who's one of our principal associates, and Tom Grant, who's one of our senior associates. And all of us specialise in professional indemnity work, and one of the professions that we tend to deal with a lot of claims for our construction professionals, and that's the focus of today. But it's a bit of a twist this month. So this is FutureProof meets Breaking Ground. And for those of you who don't already know about our FutureProof series, it's a series of articles, resources, and events that we've put together focusing on the rise of artificial intelligence, AI, and its potential impact on the world of professional indemnity insurance. Don't worry, if you've missed out on some of our content so far, then there's a QR code on the screen. That will take you through to our FutureProof Hub, and all of the articles that we've published to date are on there. And we're also going to be circulating a link to FutureProof as well after the session. So today we're going to be looking at how AI is being adopted by professionals in the construction sector and how that is likely to develop as time moves forward. What we're also going to be doing is thinking about some of the risks and benefits of the construction industry of using AI and how, of course, that might impact on claims. But what do we mean when we talk about AI? So there is a type of what's called narrow AI that's been around for years, and that's the sort of technology that all of us, without knowing it really, use in our everyday lives. So the AI, things like Siri or Alexa that are built into your smartphones or home speakers, predictive text messaging, all of that kind of thing. The development, though, that has really sparked quite a lot of excitement across the board is the development of what's called generative AI or Gen AI. And that's really the use of large language and image models to generate new content and ideas. And of course, that's got the potential for all sorts of uses by professionals. And for the purposes of today's talk, we're going to be looking at developments which utilize both sorts of AI. And now I'm going to hand over to Tom, and he's going to be talking to you about some examples about how AI is already being used in the construction industry. Tom.
Thanks, Neil. As those of you who attended our recent FutureProof conference will know, there's been a real focus on the way architects are embracing the use of AI and the potential benefits it can have in that space. So today we thought we'd recap some of the key themes there, whilst also opening the discussion out a bit to look at some other examples of construction professionals who are really getting to grips with the application and benefits of AI. We hope that by doing that, it'll be clear just how wide-ranging the potential benefits of AI are in the construction sector, before then talking about how that might impact on claims. Now, as I said at the top, architects have arguably been on the front line in terms of adopting AI, and that's really consistent with a general theme of architects being quite early adopters of new technologies. We think about tools like CAD and BIM software. But more recently, AI is introducing really novel ways of helping architects with design optimization and compliance checking. For example, AI-driven software can immediately check and ensure that, for example, MEP systems won't interfere with structural designs, reducing potentially very costly rework. And in that way, AI is not only benefiting architects, but it can really help with design coordination between architects and engineers. We certainly see a lot of defects claims where issues have arisen due to a lack of that type of design coordination between architects and engineers. And this is an area that we think is ripe for improvement using technology, which is now very widely available and automates a lot of the cross-checking, which was previously done manually and where those types of issues can easily arise. An excellent example of that technology being put to use was on the Crossrail project in London. There, designers were dealing with a really high-frequency commuter line with some 26 miles of tunnels beneath London, where you can imagine it was competing for space with the existing underground network and a labyrinth of water and gas mains, electric cables, sewers, and so on. On that project, AI algorithms could automatically detect potential clashes between those systems and the proposed structural elements for Crossrail, and it suggested real-time design solutions to avoid those conflicts. And when you consider the incredibly complex underground environment involved in a project like that, that's almost the perfect example of AI really enhancing that design coordination that we spoke about, and not only boosting efficiency, but avoiding clashes which could then be extremely difficult and costly to resolve down the line. And that's something we'll touch on again later, where we talk about the opportunities for AI to reduce the risk of claims. Moving away from those involved in design, project managers are using a type of AI-powered reality capture and analytics platform to monitor construction sites in real time. These platforms use 360-degree cameras to capture footage from sites, which is then analysed and relayed to project managers without them needing to attend site. From a project management standpoint, one of the real key benefits of that is obviously to monitor real-time progress against the project schedule. But as you can imagine, there's numerous potential uses for that type of technology, and we're hearing reports of it being used for things like billing, to verify that subcontractors have completed tasks in real time before then authorizing payment, quality control to identify defects and ensure compliance with required standards, and also site safety. And having real-time footage from a site can obviously help identify hazards and hopefully reduce accidents. For an example of this technology in use, here in the UK, Vinci has rolled it out across all of its live projects and estimates that it saves some 6,000 labour hours annually. The last example we want to talk about before moving on is the use of AI-powered technology to perform tasks which would traditionally be undertaken by building contractors. In a way, that almost feels like the final frontier for AI in construction, because whilst we can perhaps all understand how AI can help compare designs or monitor compliance using technology which is available in various industries, we don't necessarily see or hear much about AI actually being directly involved in the construction of a project. However, perhaps unsurprisingly, China seems to be leading the way on that front with a project we can see here to construct a 180-metre dam layer by layer using AI-controlled robots and 3D printing without any human workers on site whatsoever. I would caveat that slightly on the basis there's a lot of really interesting, excuse me, really interesting information about the project and the technology involved, which was released in 2022 and referred to a completion date in 24, but I haven't yet been able to find any more recent updates on its current status or whether it's actually complete. Perhaps those robots have been sleeping on the job a bit there. But it is really fascinating in the sense that every aspect of the construction there is controlled by AI-powered robots, from calculating the fill materials required, then collecting and transporting that material across site with driverless vehicles, before it's then paved and rolled, again with a fully automated system. And for good measure, AI-powered robots then gather and send real-time progress updates to a scheduling system, which is monitored remotely. Obviously, we're not seeing anything quite on that scale here in the UK yet, but if the technology is out there, it really is only a matter of time before it becomes more widespread. And given the pace of change in AI, it wouldn't be at all surprising to see this more widely used in the not too distant future. On that note, Sophie, how do you think the use of AI in construction is likely to develop in the future?
Thanks, Tom. So we can see the use of AI in construction developing in all sorts of ways going forward. But for today, I'm just going to touch on two key areas where AI is expected to play an increasingly prominent role in the construction sector. So firstly, as Tom just mentioned with the project in China, there are numerous examples of robotic or autonomous systems being developed for use in general construction tasks. So that includes automated earth-moving equipment, which is being developed and uses GPS technology to carry out operations like grading and excavating with a really high level of precision and no human intervention. And there is also a fully automated bricklaying robot, which has been developed in Australia. And on the slide, you can see a picture of that robot, which we understand is now being used in the US. And then we also have collaborative robots or cobots, which have been developed to work alongside human teams and help with a range of tasks like painting, welding, assembly, that sort of thing. There's also an example of a so-called Swiss Army knife of robots, which was developed in Germany and has been used successfully on a large tunneling project in Austria. Elsewhere, AI is expected to play an increasing role in promoting sustainability and eco-friendly practices from design to completion. So we see that in environmental analysis, where AI models are used to assess the project's impact on the local ecosystem. And that was used on the HS2 project, where that was a high-profile concern. Things like material selection. So marine machine learning algorithms evaluate material options based on factors like embodied carbon, durability and recyclability. And that helps builders to choose an eco-friendly alternative, which would minimize the project's carbon footprint. AI systems can also be used to optimize construction techniques, to identify inefficiencies, reduce waste, and promote smarter workflows. And that would result in a more sustainable structure. Finally, AI can help with tracking compliance with standards like BREEAM, flagging areas for improvement, and ensuring alignment with sustainability goals. So I'm aware that a lot of that overlaps with existing technology that we've already talked about, but these are areas where we think that the uptake of AI and the technological strides are being made are really happening at pace, and so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens going forwards with that. I appreciate that's something of a whistle-stop tour of some of the key emerging themes in this area. But having set the scene in terms of how and where AI is being used by construction professionals, we're now going to have a look at its potential impact in terms of claims against those professionals. So, Tom, how do you think the use of AI might reduce the risk of claims against construction professionals?
I think there tends to be two sides to the debate on AI. There are those who think it's marvelous and will make everything much better and much more efficient, and those who are perhaps a bit more skeptical and tend to think that the potential risks outweigh the benefits. I mean, the potential benefits of AI are huge across all industries. In medicine, for example, the potential to quickly identify diseases and develop life-saving treatments is genuinely groundbreaking. But from our point of view, and in terms of minimizing the risk of claims against construction professionals, I think the main benefit of AI is that it really addresses one of the biggest causes of claims across the board, which is just human error. An example where we often see this in construction is with compliance checking, for example, with the requirements of a contract or specification or building regulations. AI, if it's properly trained, should be able to undertake that sort of checking much more reliably and efficiently, which should translate to a really significant reduction in breach of contract and defects claims. Just briefly, the flip side of that, particularly where building regs are concerned, is that the requirements are often very far from straightforward, as we all know. As we see with cladding claims following the Grenfell tragedy, whilst human error may play a part in claims due to a failure to follow building regs, the issues may be just too complex or nuanced for AI, at least at the moment. So there remains a really vital need for an element of human intervention and expertise just to sense check those AI outputs wherever it's used. As we mentioned earlier, AI-powered predictive analytics can quickly analyze really huge amounts of data, and they are being used to accurately identify potential delays or overspend on a project ahead of time. I'm sure we can all appreciate how that should also translate into a reduction of claims, given that those are issues which tend to be a really significant driver of disputes in the construction sector. We also have the exciting, if not slightly scary, developments in real-time monitoring of construction sites by AI-powered systems. In theory, that technology should mean that potential issues on site are being picked up much earlier, reducing the risk of a claim down the line. If we take the example of an issue with foundations, for example, far better to pick that up early and take steps to resolve it before the walls have been constructed, for example, rather than later when remedial works are going to be far more extensive and costly and have a real knock-on effect on the rest of the project. As I mentioned earlier, AI site monitoring should also help identify potential safety hazards and prevent accidents, which should also mean a reduction in injury claims. So I think there we've set out a few areas where AI really does have the potential to reduce the risk of claims in the short to medium term. But as we know, it brings about its own unique risks and challenges. So, Neil, looking at it from the opposite perspective, how might the use of AI actually increase the risk of claims against construction professionals?
Thanks, Tom. So, a lot of the risks that we're going to talk about now that they don't just apply to construction professionals, and the more that we've looked at this, the more there are kind of common themes occurring kind of across the board. But just to touch upon a few that we think are probably most relevant here. Um, Firstly, what we've called hallucinations. In other words, situations where AI and generative AI in particular just gets things wrong. So, as an example, we recently used an open source AI model to summarize the judgments given by the court in a reported case. Now, what we found is that the AI produced a fairly accurate summary of the decision at first instance, but the summary provided of the appeal decision turned out to be kind of fundamentally wrong. And then combined with that, AI is only as good as the data that it draws on to produce its output. And that's a process known as grounding. So in short, if you give an AI model poor data to work on, or indeed if there's kind of human error when inputting the task that you want the AI to undertake, then you won't get reliable results. So just pausing there for a second, it's probably a combination of those two factors which pose the greatest risk to professionals at the moment. In other words, there are still question marks about the accuracy and the reliability of the output that AI is generating. Now, what that means is that whilst AI tools can be extremely helpful, there is still very much a need for the outputs they produce to be kind of properly checked by an experienced professional. It's also worth highlighting a couple of other things as well. Data protection risks, I think these are going to be more of a concern for professionals who don't necessarily have resources to build or purchase their own bespoke AI tools. But what professionals need to be aware of and bear in mind is that data that they're putting into open source type models is not confidentiality protected. And so that is potentially going to be an area for claims where people are putting kind of client confidential information, in theory, into the public domain. I've also highlighted intellectual property disputes. Depending on the data that they're drawing from, AI generated kind of designs and models may generate content that could infringe on existing copyright or intellectual property rights. Now, we can see that that might, for example, lead to disputes over who actually owns the rights to AI created designs produced by architects using various kind of AI tools. That could, you can foresee, delay projects, lead to costly litigation. And I'm sure that some of you are aware already of an ongoing claim which is being pursued by Getty Images about the use of its images by an AI platform without a license. And then cybersecurity breaches. I mean, I think as AI becomes more commonplace and used, and where AI systems are being used to process vast amounts of sensitive client confidential data on big projects, they are inevitably going to become kind of prime targets for cyber attacks. And breaches, I think, could therefore lead to data theft, project delays, financial losses, you name it, which might result in claims against construction professionals. I think in the construction sphere specifically, there are also concerns that as time goes on, building designs created by AI might end up using kind of novel or untested design methods or unusual materials, for example, which might be more prone to failures or defects, and that potentially could leave the professional exposed. And I think there is also the potential for projects to be disrupted if AI systems fail. You know, temporary failure or malfunctioning of systems could cause huge issues on a site if that site is reliant on the use of AI. So thinking about the 3D printing robots that we were talking about earlier. Of course, that kind of issue isn't isolated to AI. It applies to other forms of tech as well. And we saw an example of that last summer when issues with the CrowdStrike affected millions of systems using Windows, and it resulted in all kinds of disruption. The other point to highlight is that over time, the increased use of AI is likely, we think, to lead to some complex liability disputes where a claim might be brought against a construction professional, but there's a possibility that the cause of the error which has occurred is actually a fault with the AI model that's been used. Now, in those cases, of course, the professional insurer will want to be pursuing recovery actions against the AI provider, but I'm afraid that's going to be far from straightforward. And here's why. Firstly, because I think establishing a fault with the AI is likely to be difficult to prove. And then secondly, there are going to be separate questions over whether the loss claimed by the claimant was actually caused by human error, a fault in the AI model, or a mixture of both. So I think what we're likely to see perhaps over the next few years is a rise in the need for kind of AI specific experts who are able to kind of analyze and unpick exactly how errors have taken place. And then thirdly, of course, if the professional's contract with the AI provider is on that provider's standard terms, those are likely to impose pretty strict limits on the types of loss recoverable, the maximum sums recoverable, that kind of thing. Now, if those contracts are subject to English law, then you would expect the Unfair Contract Terms Act to apply and for some of those provisions to be challengeable, but it will be part of the mix when it comes to making successful recoveries. It's also worth highlighting just before we move on that there are no cases that we're aware of yet in the TCC where a claim has been brought against a construction professional based on their use of AI. So the majority of kind of live cases, active cases in that kind of AI sphere, if you like, they tend to be at the moment in that kind of intellectual property questions. That said, I think it probably is a question of when and not if we get the first reported construction dispute where AI is in the mix somewhere. And it'll be fascinating to see at that point what issues are brought before the court and, of course, how the TCC deals with them. And then just a final point before we kind of move on from this section. As things stand, the main focus is on the types of claims that construction professionals may face by using AI. But as the technology develops, and as we've been hearing, it is developing at an incredibly fast rate. There may well come a point where there are AI models that are able to undertake certain types of tasks, frankly, far more efficiently than a human being. And there's therefore likely to come a point where construction professionals may end up facing claims for failing to use AI for certain tasks, for doing them manually, where in fact the technology could do them far more efficiently. So plenty of food for thought. A lot of things that we don't know yet in terms of the direction of travel. But Sophie, what do you think maybe some of the kind of key takeaways from what we've been discussing this morning?
Thanks, Neil. I think there's a few things to think about. From a professional's point of view, or if you're an insurer or a broker advising an insured on this, we would suggest firstly that professionals need to have very clear internal policies and procedures about how they use AI. So that needs to include what the AI is being used for, who's going to use it, and the parameters for its acceptable use before the AI is trialed. We wouldn't suggest using AI on a live project without really carefully thinking about the implications of that. And if AI is going to be used on a client's file, the client needs to give clear and informed consent first. So in many ways, using AI should be a selling point. It produces cost efficiencies and greater savings. But clients should be made aware that the software is being used on the project first. All of that said, we would encourage professionals to take the opportunity to experiment with AI tools if they're available, but only once they've considered those points and also made sure that they're comfortable with the data security provisions on those tools. If anyone needs any advice on ensuring that those issues are covered, we have a team of tech lawyers here who may be able to advise on that. When using AI, we would suggest that you use an element of caution, sense check the output and make sure that you're happy that the resulting product is correct. And obviously make sure that your team's doing that too. And that's really the biggest risk we see of using AI in a general sense, but particularly on construction projects. Professionals need to view the use of AI as a tool to improve a particular process rather than an end in itself. It shouldn't be relied on to complete a task without a layer of oversight by an experienced professional, making sure that what's coming out of it is accurate. From an insurer's point of view, the fact is we haven't seen any professional indemnity claims arising from the use of AI yet. There's been a couple of examples about fabricated cases being cited in hearings, which most people probably will have heard of. But other than that, there isn't very much to talk about. And we think that's probably because at the moment, professionals are being very cautious about how they're using AI. We suspect that issues will start to come out further down the track as professionals become more used to AI and may become more over-reliant or more complacent. And that's when we think there's likely to be an uptick of claims from AI-related issues. In terms of whether a claim is likely to be covered, obviously that's going to depend on the type of policy and the facts of the case. And we probably don't have time to get into the detail of coverage issues today, but that's something that we'll look at in one of our upcoming Cover Talk webinars. So we have Harriet, our senior legal advisor, listening in at the moment and monitoring questions. Harriet, have we got time for any questions? Have we got any questions?
Just a very zippy one, if I may suggest. The question is this. Obviously, this is a talk about focusing on AI used in the construction sector. Do you choose that because, in your view, collectively or otherwise, that construction is more high risk than in any other area? Whichever one of you would like to comment in a nanosecond.
That's a good question. I think it depends on how you view AI. So, from a personal perspective, my view is that actually the increased use of AI in the construction sector will probably overall reduce risk rather than increase it. I say that because I think there are so many moving parts of a construction project that there are so many potentials for something to go awry. I think the increased use of AI will help to kind of reduce the risk and kind of fill the gaps where, human error unfortunately sometimes occurs. The flip side of that is that, of course, it's not without its risk. So you've got to make sure that you've got proper guardrails and approaches to that use of AI so that at least for the moment and the foreseeable future, the outputs are being properly checked. And I think there probably is a concern within the kind of construction PI industry that there is the potential for, an error to be repeated multiple times using AI, depending on the kind of construction project and the way in which the AI is being used. So swings and roundabouts, you might say, but I tend to think that it's probably a positive thing for the construction industry rather than a massive risk area.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? It would also be a positive for all those poor individuals who are asking for work to be done in their homes. I should think if that came up a notch or two in terms of regulatory requirement, they'd be absolutely delighted. But it's a massive, massive plate of information to think about, isn't it? And on that note, I'll pass back to you to close up for today.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we're out of time. I hope that you've enjoyed and got something out of today. As ever, please do kind of respond to the feedback forms that we circulate. And if you've got any ideas or future ideas for future editions, then just do let us know. We'll be back next month. And in the meantime, just thank you very much for joining us and have a great day.